Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shiur.
Shalom, welcome back to today's Daf Yomi Shabbos Daf Kufav. We are 3 lines from the top. Says the Gemara, V'chol ha'mekalkel and p'tur, and this was a rule established by the Mishnah here, that all those that are engaged in acts of kilkul and acts of destruction on Shabbos, they're patur. That's not considered to be a meleches machsheves, something of a constructive nature, of design, of creation. Kilkul, destruction, is not considered to be a malach, and therefore this fellow would be patur. Continues the Gemara, Tani Rabavo Kamei Rabbi Yochanan. Ravo presented a brisa in front of Rabbi Yochanan as follows. The brisa says, Kol ha'mekalkel p'tur, indeed all those that are engaged in kilkul are patur, chutz, except for 2 things. Chutz mei choyvel u'maver, except for the malacha of choyvel, if one inflicts a wound. So although it's something of destruction, it is a kilkul, nevertheless he is chayiv, is considered to be a malacha. U'maver, that's burning. So although this as well is considered to be a kilkul, he's burning something, destroying something, nevertheless it is considered to be a malacha and is chayiv. So these 2 things are in contrast to other malachas, which need to be done in a constructive manner. When it comes to choyvel, inflicting a wound, or maver, burning, even though they are acts of complete destruction, they are considered to be a malacha, and this fellow is liable. Amar Leis, Rabbi Yochanan responded, he didn't like this. He said, Puk tani livra, go teach it outside. Go teach it outside the Beis Medrash. This is not a brisa to be relied upon. Puk tani lebara, choyvel u'maver, ain't a mishnah. This brisa that you've presented to me regarding choyvel u'maver, that even if it's done derech kilkul, the one is chayiv, ain't a mishnah. It's not a mishnah. Not something to be relied upon. Because even when it comes to choyvel u'maver, it needs to be done in a manner of tikkun and constructive manner, and only then is it regarded as a malacha. Therefore, this brisa that you presented ain't a mishnah. Himtim tzaleim a mishnah. Now, if you suggest that is indeed something to be relied upon, this brisa is reliable, then we must reinterpret the brisa. The brisa doesn't mean that he did the choyvel and the maver in a manner which was absolutely destructive. Rather, choyvel b'tzarach l'kalvoi. We're speaking about that he inflicted the wound because he needed the blood for his dog. So even though it's an act of destruction, he's inflicting a wound, but since there's some sort of side benefit being derived, tzarach l'kalba, he needs the blood for his dog, therefore it takes on a positive nature. It's considered to be an act of a constructive nature, and therefore he's chayiv. Maver, the case of burning, is speaking about b'tzarach la'afra. He needs the ashes. So even though he's burning, he's destroying, it's considered to be a tikkun, because he needs the ashes. He's deriving some sort of side benefit here, and therefore it is not regarded as a kilkul, and he is chayiv. But certainly in a case where he's inflicting the wound or burning simply for the sake of kilkul, of destroying, that's considered to be a kilkul, and it's just like the other examples of mekalkel, and he would be patur. Let's take a look at Rashi inside, beginning with 3 lines from the top. So this was the Rebavo presenting the brisa that all mekalkel are patur except for 2 things: choyvel and maver, inflicting a wound or burning. Says Rashi, chutz mi choyvel ba'adam, inflicting a wound on a person, the mekalkel, although he's destroying, b'chayav. Nevertheless, we see that it's chayav. How do we know this? Nan, we learned in the Mishnah. HaChoyvel b'chaver b'Shabbos patur. If one inflicts a wound on his friend on Shabbos, he's patur. He's patur from paying the monetary compensation. Why? Patur l'shalom mipnei shenidain b'nafshe, because he is liable for capital punishment, and the halacha is when one is mechuyev misa, he is patur from paying. So apparently, even though he did chavala, inflicting a wound, which is an act of kilkul, this results in a chiv misa. The second thing was maver. Maver is hagadish. For instance, he burns up the gadish, the stack of grain, mekalkelu v'chayev. Because it's not as learned in Mishnah. V'hu shehidlik es hagadish patur. If a person burns up the gadish on Shabbos, he's patur men tashlum. He doesn't have to pay. Neither benafshe. Once again, he's chayiv misa, and therefore that exempts him from paying. So apparently, these 2 acts of choyvel and maver result in a chiv misa, even though they are kilkul. So this was Ravo's brisa. Rabbi Yochanan challenged. He says, no, ain't a mishnah. It's not something to be relied upon. The mekakelu pater, because if he is destroying, he is pater. Why then, in the case of chayvel or maver, will he be chayiv? In the case where he was makalkel, why will he be chayiv? Says Rabbi Yechon, apparently this brisa, which tells us that chayvel or maver is chayiv even though it is a kilkel, because there's some side benefit being derived. For instance, says Rashi, but tzarich ladam hayetu min hachavala lekalboy. We're speaking about he inflicted a wound because he needed the dam from coming from the wound to feed his dog. Now, although he's inflicting a wound, he's being mekalkel by the fellow who's receiving the wound. Despite that, the fact that there's a kilkel going on, eitzel nechbal, mesaken eitzel kelev, it's considered to be a tikkun with regard to the kelev. So although the nature of this act is an act of destruction of kilkel, but since it results in some sort of a secondary residual side benefit here, it's considered to be an act of tikkun, and therefore he is chayiv. Okay, so to summarize, we have Rabbi Vo who presented a brisa, which according to Rabbi Vo's interpretation was teaching us a chiddush that chayvel and maver, in contrast to other malachis, which require to be done in a constructive manner, these two are different. These two are considered to be a malacha even though they are completely of destructive nature. Whereas Rav Yochanan responded by saying, no, the brisa didn't mean that. The brisa meant that although they are kilkel, but we're speaking at a case where there was some sort of benefit being derived as well, and therefore, since it has that positive element to it, he is chayiv. But if it's something which is absolutely destructive, completely kilkel, even when it comes to chayvel and mavi, he'll be pater, just like all other malachis. Continues the Gemara. This is a kasha on Rabbi Vo, who said that chayvel and mavi are different, and even if they're done there kilkel, he is chayiv. Well, we got kasha va'anan tnan, but haven't we learned in our Mishnah, kol mekalkel peturin, all those engaged in acts of destruction are pater. So apparently even chayvel and maver are included in that rule. The Mishnah doesn't differentiate. So there's a kasha on Rav Vo and the brisa presented by Rav Vo. We have a contradiction between the Mishnah, which includes chayvel and maver with all other malachis, and Rav Vo's presentation of the brisa, which seems to say otherwise. Says the Gemara, the Mishnah and the brisa are reflecting two different shittas. Masnisin Rabbi Yehuda, the Mishnah which tells us that all those engaged in kilkel, even chayvel and maver, are pater, is in accordance with the Shita of Yehuda. Brisa, Reb Shimon, the Brisa presented by Rav Vo, which told us that a chayvel and maver is chayiv, although he is being makakel, is representing the Shita of Reb Shimon. Now, why? How do these things correlate with the opinions of Rabbi Yehuda and Reb Shimon? So Rashi begins by saying, "Well, it's not clear." It wasn't really explained where the connection is. But then Rashi proceeds, V'li nira, and he gives a very deep explanation to indeed present this correlation, this connection between Yehuda and Reb Shimon and the matter at hand. He explains as follows. The connection here is based on the machlekes we discussed in Kuf Hey with regard to a case of malacha she'eina tzrich legufa. If one is engaged in doing malacha, which is not needed for its own defined purpose. For instance, he is carrying out a mace from the home simply to get rid of, to free himself of the tumas. He's transporting, he's doing the malacha beitzah, but not for its own sake, not because he needs the item outside, but because he needs the home free of tumah. That's a malacha she'eina tzricha legufa. It's not needed for its own defined sake and purpose. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he's chayav, because although he's not doing the malacha for its own sake, nevertheless, since he's deriving benefit and unknown pleasure, even though it's resulting from the malacha, it's a side benefit. It's not what this malacha is meant to do. Nevertheless, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that's considered to be a malacha. According to Rabbi Yehuda, we reckon with even the side benefit that is resulting from the malacha. Therefore, explains Rashi, when it comes to chayvel and maver, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it needs to have an element of tikkun, a constructive element. For instance, if he will take do the chavala for the sake of extracting the blood for his kelev, that's considered to be an act of tikkun, because although the the Maisa itself is inherently destructive, the act of wounding is an act of destruction. Nevertheless, since it results in some sort of benefit, so that he has the blood for his kelef, we regard this as a malach of tikkun. Likewise, when it comes to the maver, the burning, even though it's inherently an act of destruction, since he needs the ashes, it takes on a new form. This act is considered to be an act of tikkun. And therefore, according to Yehuda, chayvel and maver are no different than other malachos. There's no reason to differentiate. All malachos have the same criterion. They need to be done in a manner of tikkun. They need to have a constructive nature. Chayvel and maver as well. They need to be done in a manner which a person will derive benefit from it. He needs the blood from the wound. He needs the ash from the fire. Therefore, these things are considered to be an act of tikkun. And just like any other malacha, they're chayiv. So the Mishnah, which categorizes chayvel and maver together with everybody else, is Rabbi Yehuda, who maintains that chayvel and maver are only chayiv if they result in some sort of benefit coming from it. And therefore they take on a form of a constructive act. As opposed to Reb Shimon, who holds that a malacha she'ena tzrich l'gufa is pater. If one does a malacha not for its defined purpose, it carries out the mace because he needs the home free of tumah, he's pater, because although there's a benefit resulting, we don't reckon with that. It's a side benefit. It's not the primary act that he's doing. He doesn't need the transporting of the mace, the actual mace in the Rosh Hashanah. He doesn't need that. So we don't reckon with the benefit that is resulting, the extraneous benefit that is resulting from the malacha. Explains Rashi. So according to Reb Shimon, there is no situation of chayvel and maver that can be considered tikkun. He inflicts the wound to get the blood. That's not reckoned with. The inherent maisa, the action here of inflicting the wound is inherently of destructive nature. We don't reckon with the side benefit that is resulting. Likewise, when it comes to burning, Rashi says even if he takes a piece of wood as fuel to cook up the food in the pot, it's an act of destruction according to Reb Shimon. We don't reckon with the benefit that's resulting, because according to Reb Shimon, we focus on the inherence of the act itself. So therefore, says Rashi, there's no situation where chayvel and maver can be considered positive acts of constructive acts. So apparently, when there's a isser of chayvel and maver on Shabbos, it is even when they are completely acts of destruction. So Rashi explains this is the basis for the Gemara connecting these two opinions with Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Once again, Rabbi Yehuda will hold that chayvel and maver also fall into the category of the other malachos, and they need to be done specifically with an element of positivity. It has to be of a constructive nature. For instance, he needs the blood for his dog, he needs the ashes for some reason, and therefore he's chayiv. Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, when he derives some sort of even side benefit, that accords, that grants this act, this maisa, a status of a mesaken. Whereas according to Reb Shimon, side benefit is not reckoned with. And therefore, apparently, chayvel and maver will be chayiv and considered malacha, even though there will be completely and comprehensively acts of destruction and of kilkul. So the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda and the Brisa, which according to Ravo, told us that when it comes to chayvel and maver, he is chayiv, even though it is an act of kilkul, is following the shita of Reb Shimon, who holds that chayvel and maver are different than other malachas, and even when they are done, they are kilkul, he is chayiv. So we presented the background here, but what is the source of Reb Shimon? How does he know? How does he know this halacha that chayvel and maver will be considered malacha even though they're acts of destruction? Let's see the Gemara. My time with Reb Shimon. So what is the reason? What is the source of Reb Shimon? Says the Gemara, we have a source. From the fact that the pasuk needed to allow a bris milah to take place on Shabbos. Rashi brings the pasuk of Bayayim Hashmini. The word of Bayayim seems to be extra. Bayayim Yisera, the Gemara says it's superfluous. Why does the pasuk need to say Ubayayim Hashmini? It simply could have said Ubashmini. So the word of Bayayim is extra to teach us that even on Shabbos one can do milah. Now why did the Torah need to give us that allowance? He's merely engaged in an act of destruction. He's inflicting a wound. The fact that the Torah need to allow Mila on Shabbos, we infer from here an ordinary wound that is inflicted on Shabbos is considered to be a malach and is chayiv. Apparently, one who does chavala, he is chayiv. Not in the context of bris milah, he is chayiv. So this is the source that when it comes to the malacha of chayiv, he is chayiv, even though it's an act of destruction. What about burning? What about mavir? We have another ayah. The fact that the Torah prohibits burning by the bas kohen, the daughter of a kohen, and married the daughter of a kohen who committed znus, and she gets sreifa. Sreifa is done by taking a piece of lead and lighting it and feeding it to her. So the Torah tells us one cannot do that on Shabbos. Beis Din cannot apply this einish on Shabbos. The fact that the Torah need to do that, apparently, lighting a fire, burning something on Shabbos, even though it's an act of destruction, is considered to be a malacha. Shma mina mavir ba'al machayev. Apparently, an ordinary burning is chayev because it's considered to be a malacha, despite the fact that it is a mekalkel. So we have a source for chayvel, we have a source from mavir. Chayvel is from mila, and mavir is from the burning of the bas kohen. Continues the Gemara. How does Rabbi Yehuda respond to this? Rabbi Yehuda maintains that even chayvel and mavir needs to be done in a manner of tikkun. But if it's done in a manner which is destructive, in a matter of kilkel, even chayvel and mavir will be pater. Says the Rabbi Yehuda responds by saying, you can't bring a raya from bris milah and from the sreifa of the bas kohen. Why? In those cases, he's engaged in an act of tikkun. It's a constructive act. Why? Because Ravashi, mali l'saken mila. What difference does it make if he's being masaken the mila? Meaning, the bris milah is actually an act of tikkun. It's a constructive act. He's fixing the child. So it's not considered to be an act of kilkul, mali l'saken kli. What difference does it make doing the tikkun of the milah or being masaken kli, fashioning a utensil on Shabbos? He's doing an act of tikkun, a constructive act, and therefore, that's why the Torah needs to tell us that one can do it on Shabbos, because the bris milah is an act of tikkun. But if it would be something which is completely of the destructive nature, he would certainly be pater. So that's with regard to milah. You can't be right from milah, because milah indeed is a tikkun. What about the raya from the burning of the lead? There as well, said Ravashi, mali levashel psila. What does it make? Cooking up this psila, mali levashel simanim, or cooking the simanim, the dyes, the herbs needed for the dyeing of the wool, of the material in the Mishkan. So Rashi explains that when a person lights this piece of lead, it does the malacha of bishul because it softens and it hardens. It's actually benefiting the piece of lead. So it's not a destructive maisa. It's an act of creation, of fashioning, of designing. It's of constructive nature. Therefore, says Rabbi Yehuda, the Torah needs to prohibit that, to asa that, because it is a malacha of tikkun. But certainly Rabbi Yehuda maintains that if a person inflicts a wound or burns simply for the sake of destroying an act of kilkul, he would be pater because chayvel and maver need to fit the criterion of tikkun just like all other malachas. Let's take a look at Rashi inside. 9 lines from the bottom, beginning with the words mali masaken kli. So this is Rabbi Yehuda responding. He says, Mila is a tikkun. What difference does it make if it's Mila or it's fixing a kli? Hanami masaken gavru. Mila as well is fixing the person. Veish malacha b'tikkun zeh. Bishop psila. Shu madlik psila. This is the psila, the piece of leather, of lead, which they used to light. Shu madlik psila shall aver of lead. Put in her mouth. V'derech bishul zeh. This is derech bishul. V'chayv ala bishul. He's not ruining the piece of lead. He's hardening it, and therefore, certainly it's an act of tikkun, and it's considered to be a malacha on Shabbos. So they used to cook the herbs for the mechas mishkan. So Rabbi Yehuda would say that we equate mila with fixing a utensil. We equate the burning of the lead with cooking up the herbs. They're considered to be acts of tikkun, and therefore they're considered to be melachas on Shabbos. So, in summation, Rabbi Yehuda maintains that the malachas of chayvel, inflicting a wound, umaver, and lighting a fire, burning, are equal to all other malachas. They must fit the same criteria. They must be done derech tikkun. They must have an element of a constructive element to them. Therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says, if they are done derech kilkul, he is pater. If he is doing mesaken, if they have a positive element to them, for instance, if he's doing the wound because he needs the blood for his dog, or he's burning because he needs the ashes, he will be chayiv. According to Reb Shimon, when it comes to chayvel maver, we're not concerned with the fact that it's something of a destructive nature. Even kilkul will be chayiv. So regardless of whether it's mekalkal or mesaken, when it comes to chayvel maver, he will be chayiv. The Gemara explained us that this is based on their opinions elsewhere. That according to Rabbi Yehuda, we reckon with a side benefit that is resulting from the malacha. So when it comes to the malachas of chayvel maver as well, he requires that there should be at least some sort of element of benefit, of hana. So even though the act is primarily one of destruction, but since it produces some benefit, he needs the blood for his dog, he needs the ashes, that is reckoned with, and that is part of the equation, and that grants this maisa a din of mesaken, and therefore that's required. Otherwise, he's a makak on his potter. According to Reb Shimon, we don't reckon with that side benefit that results from the malacha. We focus on the primary act. Since chayvel and maver are inherently acts of destruction, it would be of no gain if there is a side benefit resulting as well. Therefore, according to Reb Shimon, apparently these malachas are different than other malachas, where even if they're done merely as acts of destruction, makalkal, this is the malacha. The Torah was mechayiv. The Torah was mechadish that chayvel and maver are different than other malachas. When it comes to these malachas, even if they're done there kilkul, this is the nature of their malacha, and he is chayiv. Continues the Gemara. Shiur HaMalavan, we're going back to our Mishnah, which listed us some malachas associated with the production of fibers and of threads. Malavan is washing, Manapitz is combing. And what is the shiur? What is the minimum requirement for the malacha? K'maloi roichav hasit kafel. So roichav hasit is the distance between the index finger and the middle finger. So it needs to be double this amount. It needs to produce fibers that can make a thread, which will carry over double this distance. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yosef machvi kafel. He indicated the shiur of Mloy Rechav Hasid Kafel is, he showed the distance between the index and the middle finger. So that is the shiur of Rechav Hasid, and the Mishnah tells us it needs to be kafel, double that amount. Rabbi Chir Ba'ami machvi pashet. He indicated a different type of way to measure it, pashet, without doubling, meaning he extended his thumb from his index finger. So this distance between these fingers actually equal the distance of the Rechav Hasid, the smaller distance between the shorter distance between the index and the middle finger. So in this case, only one is required. One from here to here equals this in double. So Rabbi Yosef machvi kafel, he indicated the distance between this and this, and needs to be double. And Rabbi Chir Ba'am indicated the distance between the thumb and the index finger, which in case you only need one. We need a thread which travels that distance between one finger and the other. Continues the Mishnah. We're going to proceed with the Melach of Tzeda. What exactly? How do we define trapping? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Hatzot Tzipor L'Migdal. If one drives a bird into a migdal, into a closet, into a cupboard, Utzvi L'Bayis, or a deer into a home, into a room, Chayev. That is considered to be the Melach of Tzeda. V'chacham Omer, Tzipor L'Migdal. We agree when it comes to the bird, he needs to drive it into a migdal, into a closet, for it to be considered contained and trapped. Utzvi, however, when it comes to a deer, it doesn't need to be in a bias. Even legina, a garden, or lechatzer, into a yard, or lebivrin, into an enclosed area, chayev, because even that is considered to be trapped, and he has done a melach of tzed. Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer, when you speak about bivrin, not all enclosures are equal. Depends on the size and the configuration. Zakla, this is the rule. Mechusat Seder Pater. If he drives the deer into this beaver, which is still Mechusat Seder, it's still hard to grab onto the deer. It's too large, for instance, so the deer eludes the owner. In this case, it's still Mechusat Seder, it's still lacking the mice of Seder, and therefore when he drives that deer into this place, he didn't do the melacha of tzeidah. He didn't trap the deer yet. Therefore, he's put. She'ena mechusat tzeidah, but it's not lacking the act of tzeidah. It's already close at hand and control. Then, indeed, by bringing the deer into this enclosure, he has committed the melacha of tzeidah. He has trapped, and therefore he's chayiv. Let's see Rashi inside. Beginning from the Mishnah, back in Amar Aleph, 2 lines from the bottom. It says Rashi, Atzot Tzipor. This is Rabbi Yehuda speaking. If one drives a bird, until he brought it into the, he drove it into the closet, chayav. The Zui Tzedosai, this is considered to be its trapping. But if he merely drove the bird into a home, the bird is not considered to be trapped in this manner. Because it could escape via the windows. Utzvi nitzoid shechnisu lebeisai v'nal b'fanav. How do we trap a deer? Once he brings it into his home and closes the door. But merely, if you brought it into the garden or the yard, that is not regarded as tzeidah. It could still escape, it could jump over the wall, so it's not considered to be trapped, and therefore he's not chayiv. Shimon Gamliel tells us regarding this bibar, this enclosure, hamachusat tzeidah, if it is still lacking tzeidah, shakash l'toisisham, it's difficult to grab the animal there, that is not considered to be trapped. Knefarish b'gemara. Let's see the Gemara. Tanan Hasam, we learned in the Mishnah in Maseches Beitza, Ein Sodin Dogim Mina Bivrin B'Yomtiv. One may not trap fish out of the fish pond, because although the malacha is associated with Eichel Nefesh, preparation of food on Mutar Yomtiv, but Seidah is not included in that heter, so he cannot trap it. Vein Noisim Fnei Mazonis, and he cannot feed them, as Rashi says, because they're muktzah, so he can't be Teireach, he can't trouble himself for them. Avol Sodin Chayav Oif. And the Zgir said as it towards Mina Bivrin. But he may trap a chaya or a oif, foul bird, from this enclosure, because they are considered to be trapped. Once they're in there, they're already trapped. So you can merely take them out of this enclosure. He's not doing a malach of tzeidah, it's already trapped beforehand. And therefore, he can also feed them, he can place food before them. They're not muktzah. So we see from this Mishnah that a chaya or a oif that are present in a bivar, this enclosure, are considered to be trapped. Continues the Gemara. V'raminu, we have a kasha from a brisa, which tells us otherwise. Bivar shel chayis shel oif shel dogim. These enclosures of the chayis, the oifs, and the dogim ain't sodom and b'yontiv. One may not trap from them on yomtiv. Apparently, this brisa holds that even a chay and a oif that are present in this bivar are not considered to be trapped. Therefore, he cannot take them from this place because he's trapping. Likewise, he cannot place food before them because they're muktzah. Says the Gemara, we have a double contradiction. Kasha chaya chaya. We have a kasha from the chaya in the brisa here, which tells us that the chaya present in this bivar is not considered to be trapped, whereas in the Mishnah that we just quoted, the Mishnah in Beitza, we have that the chaya, which is in the beaver, is considered to be trapped. That's one kasha. Kasha chaya chaya. Kasha oifos oifos. Likewise, we have a contradiction between oifos and oifos. The Mishnah in Beitza tells us that the oifos present in this enclosure are considered to be trapped, whereas the brisa tells us that it's not trapped. It says Bishloim chaya chaya kasha. So certainly we can go ahead and answer the contradiction between one chai and the other and say as follows. The Mishnah reflects the shita of the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan mentioned in our Mishnah in Shabbos, who maintain that a chaya present in an enclosure, for instance a beaver, is considered to be trapped. We see that the Rabbanan told us if one drives a deer into a beaver, he's chayav. Apparently the deer in this enclosure is considered to be trapped. Therefore the Mishnah in Beitza tells us that on Yom Tov, one may go ahead and take the deer, the chaya, out of the beaver because it was already trapped beforehand. So the Mishnah represents Shitas Rabbanan. The Brisa, which tells us that a chaya in a beaver is not considered to be nitzai, trapped, that is reflected in the Shita of Yehuda, who maintains that when it comes to an animal, he needs to bring it to the bias to do tzeidah. But merely in a beaver, it's not considered to be trapped. Therefore, the Brisa tells us a chai which is present in this enclosure, is untrapped, is muktzah. He cannot remove it because by removing it he's doing tzeidah. So we have an answer. We resolve the seeming contradiction between the halachas of chai. Oifos kasha. However, when it comes to the contradiction regarding oifos, foul birds, we have a kasha. Why? Because we learned in our Mishnah that even according to the Shittas Chacham, all agreed, Rabbi Yehuda and Chacham both agreed that when it comes to a bird, it is only considered to be trapped when it's in a migdal, when it's in this closet, which is a very closed and restricted area. So how come the Mishnah in Beitza tells us that a oif, a bird, a fowl, which is found in even in an open area, a beaver, which is not a migdal, is considered to be trapped? So we can't find a way out of this stira. We have a stira between the Mishnah and Beitza, which tells us that a bird in a beaver is considered to be trapped. We have a brayso which tells us that's not trapped. We have a stira, and we can't say that it's depending on the machlekes, on the shittas of Rabbi Yehuda Rabbanim, because we all agree that when it comes to a bird, it needs to be specifically in a migdal. A beaver is not sufficient. Says the Gemara, v'chitema. Perhaps you'll say, oifos not a lakash. That the contradiction between oifos is not difficult. Why? It depends what type of enclosure. Bebiva mekura. The Mishnah in Beitza, which tells us that a bird found in a beaver is speaking about a covered beaver, a roof beaver, and therefore it's considered to be properly enclosed and it's considered to be trapped. The brayso, which tells us that oif found in a beaver is not considered to be trapped. Beaver she'ena mekura. We're speaking about a beaver in a beaver which is not roofed, which is not covered, and therefore, since it can just fly away, it's not considered to be nitzoid, it's not considered to be trapped. So that could be a teretz, an answer to the stira between the Mishnah and the brayso regarding oifos. Says the Gemara, but how could you say that? V'habayis the mekuru, but a home, a room which is fully covered and roofed. Ubein Rabbi Yehuda, ubein Rabban, according to Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanim, it's not considered to be trapped. The bird found in a roofed room is not considered to be trapped. Both shittas all agree that sipor lemigdal in labayis loy. When one traps a bird, if he drives it into the migdal, into the closet, a small enclosed area, that is considered to be trapping. But a bayis, a house, a room, even if it's covered, all agree there's no tzeidah taking place. So how can you say? How can you attempt to reconcile this difference between the Mishnah and Beitza and the brayso by saying that, well, depends what type of enclosure he's driving the bird into. If it's an open area, unroofed, then it's not considered to be trapped. But if the bird is found in an area which is roofed, which is mekura, a biva mekura, it's considered to be trapped. And now Mishnah, we have clear statements in the name of Yehuda and the Rabbanan that a bird needs specifically to be driven into a closet, otherwise it's not trapped. Says the Gemara, Omar Rabba Barafuna, Hacha. You know what our Mishnah is speaking about? Our Mishnah, which insists on the bird being driven into a migdal, we're speaking about Betzipa Droir Askina. We're speaking about this bird which runs freely, it lives freely. It's elusive. Some say it's a specific type of bird, a songbird. Some say it's any type of bird which has this nature. It's difficult to catch it. It doesn't accept mastery on itself. So this bird needs to be driven specifically into a migdal for tzeidah, for trapping to take place. However, an ordinary bird, even if he drives it into a larger area which is enclosed and roofed, is considered to be trapped, and that is the case which is reflected in the Mishnah in Beitza, which tells us that a bird in a beaver is trapped. We're speaking about a roofed beaver, ordinary bird which doesn't run freely and therefore is considered to be trapped. Now the brayso which the Gemara brought that told us that a bird in a beaver is not trapped, there as well it is speaking about this tzipor dror which runs freely, this rebellious bird, and therefore unless you actually drive it into this small closet, it is not considered to be trapped. The Tana Dver Bishmal, Lama Nikro Shma Tzipor Dror. Why is it called Tzipor Dror? Dara V'bayis kibasada, because dror is a lashon of living. It lives freely in the home just as it does out in the field. It runs around, it's elusive, and it's rebellious, and therefore it is difficult to snatch and to catch and to control. It needs to be specifically in a migdal for it to be considered trapped. Continues the Gemara. Hashta da asas lachi. Now, once you come to this point, that you've come away from the first teretz. Initially, one wanted to say that the Mishnah, we had a contradiction between the Mishnah and Beitza, which told us that a chay and a oif in a beaver is considered to be trapped, and the Brisa and Beitza, which tells us that they are not considered to be trapped. Initially, we wanted to say that the Mishnah is reflecting the shita of the Rabbanan, who consider the chaya and the oif in the beaver trapped. The Brisa reflects the shita of Rabbi Yehuda, who does not consider them to be trapped in this manner. But now that we've come to this point, that we've established that both the Mishnah and the Brisa are following Shitas Rabbanan, it depends what type of bird we're speaking about. The Mishnah, which tells us that a bird is trapped even in this enclosed area, is an ordinary bird. The Brisa, which says it's not trapped, is speaking about the Tzipa Dror. But they're both the Mishnah and Brisa are following Shitas Rabbanan. Now you come to this point. Now we can go ahead and offer another interpretation, even regarding reconciling the stira, the contradiction regarding chaya as well. The Mishnah tells us that a chaya in this enclosure is trapped. The Brisa tells us a chaya in this enclosure is not trapped. Both reflecting the same opinion of Shitas Rabbanan. Says the Gemara, Hashta asas lachi. Now you come to this point that you've established, interpreted the Mishnah and the Brisa both to be following Shitas Rabbanan. If so, chaya nami lekasha. We can answer the stira between chaya and chaya. Why? Depends what type of enclosure. Ha beaver gadol, ha beaver katan. If it's a large size beaver, a large size enclosure, then it's not considered to be trapped. And that is the case which the Brisa is speaking about. Therefore, the chaya in this large beaver is not trapped. Whereas the Mishnah and Beitza is speaking about the chaya present in a small beaver, and therefore is considered to be trapped. So once again, we had a kasha from the Mishnah in Beitza, which tells us that a chaya and a oif are considered to be trapped. We have the Brisa, which tells us they're not trapped. Says the Gemara, we can answer. Both are following Shitas Rabbanan. However, it depends what type of bird we're speaking about. If it's a free-running bird, it's not considered to be trapped in a beaver. If it's an ordinary bird, it is. When it comes to chaya, it depends what type of beaver. If it's a large size enclosure, then it's not trapped. If it's a small size enclosure, it is trapped. Says the Gemara, but how do we define the size? Heichidama beaver gadol, heichidama beaver katan. How do you define a large size beaver and a small size beaver? What is the formula? Amar Vashi, kolecha duroid basrei. Whenever he runs after to catch him, umatila b'chatshicha, and he reaches the animal in one lunge, beaver katan. That is regarded as a small beaver. It's small enough that he could catch it with one lunge. Therefore, the chaya present in there is considered to be trapped. V'idach, but if it's larger than that, beaver gadol, that is regarded as a large size beaver. Inami, alternatively, kolecha de nafel, tula diksalim adadi. So when the shadow of the walls reach each other, kolecha de nafel tula, whatever we find that the tula, the shadow, falls, tula diksalim adadi, the shadow of the ksalim fall on each other, and obviously it's a small beaver. That indicates that it's a small size beaver cut. V'idach, but if it's larger than that, beaver cut. Tosfos says that the height of the walls were known to them. We're speaking about a standard height of the walls of the beaver. So therefore, we can apply this formula. This is another way of determining what is a beaver gadol, what is a beaver katan. V'inami, or a third approach, kolecha de leka ukzi. If there are no ukzi, there are no corners where the animal could escape into, beaver katan, that is called a beaver katan, and the animal within it is considered to be trapped. V'idach, but otherwise, if it has these corners where the animal can run into, beaver gadol, that is regarded as a large size beaver. So in summary, we discussed the melach of tzeda, and we learned that unless the animal is severely restricted, it's in a very contained area, that's not called trapped. So Rabbi Yehuda tells us that the bird needs specifically to be driven into a migdal, into a closet, to be considered trapped. A chaya into a bayis. Chacham said, a tzipar bird, even to a bayis, is considered to be trapped. However, the tzipar dror, this free-living bird, this rebellious bird, in that case they agree that unless it's in a migdal, it's not considered to be trapped. When it comes to a chaya, Chacham maintain even if he traps it in a gina, a chatzar, a beaver in this enclosed area, that's considered to be trapped. And as the Gemara told us, this beaver needs to conform, needs to be the right size and configuration, needs to be a beaver katan, where the animal present in this beaver is considered to be fully under his control and trapped. And the Gemara gave us 3 descriptions regarding the beaver, what determines a beaver katan. Continues the Gemara. Rav Shimon Gamliel, so Rav Shimon Gamliel in the Mishnah as well concludes by saying that we must first determine the size and configuration of this enclosure to be able to determine whether the animal found within it is considered to be trapped. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yud, Amar Shmuel, halacha. Rav Shimon Gamliel, indeed, the halacha follows this opinion that the beaver must fit certain criteria. It has to have certain specifications. So the animal found within it is considered to be trapped and under his control. Amali Abai. So you say halacha, Rav Shimon Gamliel, halacha mechal de pligi. Do you mean to say that there's somebody there that's disagreeing, there's an opposing view? But haven't we just concluded that all agree to this concept, that the beaver must fit certain criteria to be considered a properly enclosed area? So why do you say halacha, which indicates that there's an opposing view? Amalei, so Yosef responded, "My nafka lachmina. What difference does it make to you?" Meaning, the bottom line is, ultimately, the halacha follows this opinion. All agree that needs to be a beaver katan. So that's why I said halacha, Rav Shimon Gamliel. Amalei Sabai responded, Gemara, Zmar Tetei. It's like one tells his friend, Gemara, learn the Gemara. Zmar Tetei, let it be just like a song. Meaningless. Just sing it like a song. Sabai is responding, he's saying, the words must have meaning. When you say halacha, Rav Shimon Gamliel, it indicates that there's somebody that opposes the view of Rav Shimon Gamliel. And if that's not the case, then the word halacha is superfluous, is meaningless. And therefore, I questioned your wording. Continues the Gemara. Tana Rabbanan, Hatzad Tzvi Suma V'Yashin. If one traps a blind deer, V'Yashin, or a sleeping deer, Chayev. So even though he seems to be Yashin, he's sleeping, he's immobilized, or he's blind, difficult for him to get around, nevertheless, if one traps even this type of deer, he has done the Malach of Tzedek. What about Chiger, a lame deer, V'Zakin, old, V'Chayla, sick, Potter, because they're considered to be already in a state of being trapped, and therefore trapping them is not a malach. Amali Abai Rav Yosef, Maish Nahani or Maish Nahani. What difference? What's the difference between the Summa and the Yashin and the other ones? Says the Gemara, Hani Avidil L'Buy. The blind and the sleeping deer, even though presently they look like they're inactive, the blind one, it's hard for him to get around. Nevertheless, when you go ahead and you get close to him and you try to catch him, they're prone to get away. Therefore, they're not considered to be trapped. Hani, but the other ones, the lame, the old, the sick, not prone to escaping, and therefore, when one grabs them, he has not done anything. But haven't we learned in the Brayso? If one traps a sick deer, he's chayiv. Apparently, it's not considered to be trapped. It's not difficult. It depends what type of sickness. When the Brayso says that even a deer which is a choyle is not trapped, it's speaking about his choyle machmas ishsa, he's sick due to a fever, in which case he can still get around. So therefore, by trapping him, he has done tzeidah. The Brayso which says that a deer which is choyle is already considered to be in a state of trapped. We're speaking about a choyle machmas uftzna on account of fatigue. He's sick, he's fatigued, he can't get around, and therefore he's immobilized. So grabbing hold of him is not considered to be trapping. Tana Rabbanan, Hatzad Chagovin, if one traps grasshoppers, Gozin, different form of grasshoppers, Tsirin, hornets, Vitushin, mosquitoes, B'Shabbos, Chayev. David Rameir, he considers this to be tzeidah. It depends. When it comes to grasshoppers, yes, that's called tzeidah. When it comes to the other types, the hornets, the mosquitoes, that's not considered to be a malach of tzeidah. Why? Kol shebeminoi nitzo et chayev. Any type which its species is generally trapped, there's some benefit from it, Chayav. Therefore, the malach of tzeda applies to that. For instance, the grasshoppers. However, v'chol she'ein b'minin nitzod, something which in its species it's not trapped. It's not the practice of people to trap this type of thing. For instance, the hornets or the mosquitoes. So malach of tzeda does not apply, and he's potter, even if he does tzeda, and atar is potter. Tani idach, we learned in another brayso, atzot chagovim, one traps grasshoppers b'shas atal, in a time when the dew is present. Rashi says their eyes, they become blinded from the dew, so they're considered to be in a state of nitzah. They're ready, like they're trapped. So if one traps them, he's potter. B'shas hasharav, in a time of extreme heat. So although it's difficult for them to get around, they're sluggish, but they're still not called trapped, and therefore if he traps them, he's chayiv. Elazar ben Ravoy Omer, im hoyu mekalchus boys, if they were swarming and coming in swarms, and he catches them potter, because it's not considered to be tzeda. Rashi says they're coming in groups together, so it's easy to catch them. The Rechanana learns that mekalchus boys means they're dropping down like raindrops. They're lacking energy, so they're not flying around properly. So if one grabs them, he has not done tzeda. Now the Gemara is going to analyze the statement of Elazar ben Avoy. What is he speaking about? The brayso discussed two different cases. Tanakama began by discussing the b'shas atal, the grasshoppers present during dew, and then he discussed b'shas hashara, a time of extreme heat. Now, when he adds, if they were swarming his potter, what is he referring to? Iboilu. So he asked the following question: Elazar ben Avoy, areishakai, is it in reference to the first part of the brayso, or yasefai, on the latter part of the brayso? Meaning, is he coming to say, well, Tanakama, you spoke about trapping something b'shas hatal in time of dew, they're mobilized, and therefore he traps his potter. I maintain, I'm machmer. That's not sufficient. Only if it is during the dew and they are coming in swarms, both are necessary. So he's coming to be machmer. Or perhaps a seifakoi. He's referring to the seifa, the latter part of the Tanakama statement, which was during the sharav, the time of extreme heat. The Tanakama says they're not considered to be mobilized. If one traps at that point, he is chayiv. Elazar ben Avoy is coming to add and say, no, I'm going to be lenient. That even in the case of sharav, if they are coming in swarms, then he is potter. Toshma, come here, Raya. Hatzot chagov mishas atal potter, b'shas hasharav chayev. If he traps them during the time of tal, he is potter. They're considered to be immobilized. When the time of extreme heat, he is chayev. Elazar ben Avoy omer af b'shas hasharav. So he's coming to be makel, to be lenient. Even at the time of extreme heat, you maintain it's called seder. I say, if they're coming in swarms, then he's potter. So he's coming to add a leniency. Not only in the time of tal is he potter, but even in the time of extreme heat, if they're they're coming in swarms, in this case, he is potter. Okay, let's make a summary. We discussed trapping a deer. If he is blind or sleeping, he is chayav, because it's going to get away. If he is chiger, lame, zakin, old, chayla, he has that sickness, a fatigue, he's immobilized. In this case, it's considered to be trapped already, and therefore, if he traps it, he's potter. When it comes to the grasshoppers, if it is bishas hatal in the time of dew, Rashi says they're blinded by the dew, therefore he's potter. In the time of extreme heat, according to Tanakam is chayav. We're going to Elazar ben Avoy. If it is also coming in swarms, then he is potter. Continues the Mishnah. Tzvi shenichnas labayis, a deer entered a home, v'nol echad b'fanav, and Reuven went ahead, closed the door. Chayav, because he trapped the deer. Nol l'shnayim, but if Reuven and Shimon both closed the door together, they did the malacha together, then they're paturin. This is the halacha of shnayim she'asur. We learned earlier that a malacha which was performed by two people, they're both patur. However, lo yochel echad luna. What if one didn't have the ability to close the door? It was a heavy door. V'nol l'shnayim, and both did it. Chayavin. Rabbi Shimon says even in this case they are patur. Let's take a look at Rashi inside. 20 lines from the bottom, beginning with the word masnisin. Tzvi shenichnas me'elav. The deer went in on his own. V'nol echad b'fanav, and one fellow closed the door. Zui tzedasai. This is considered to be its trapping. Nol l'shnayim p'turim. Dahava l'shnayim she'asur. Both did the malacha together. However, lo yochel echad lino, one didn't have the ability. Urchayu lino b'shnayim. In this case, it is considered to be ordinary, considered to be a common practice the derech for two people to do it. Therefore, each person did a malacha. Because if not for him, loy misavda, the malacha would not have been performed. So each one did a full malacha. Reb Shimon Paiter, li tamei, is following his shita, the dorish, kroi lemiftar, as he expounded, he dashed on the psukim, to exempt even zeh and yachal, even if both cannot do it on their own, they are pater, as we learned earlier in Beperek HaMatzneh. Continues the Gemara. 5 lines in the bottom. Omar of Yirmeh ba'Abba Mashmo. Hatzod Ari b'Shabbos 1 traps a lion on Shabbos. Ein chayv. He's not chayv ad she'achnisenu, until he brings him in legur zekisheloi, into his cage, which has the ability to properly contain the lion. Let's take a look at Rashi inside. 11 lines from the bottom, beginning with the words Hatzod Ari. Says Rashi, Hatzod Ari, one traps a lion. I feel a toisa, even if he grabs it. This is not considered to be its trapping. Because when the lion gets mad, he destroys anything in his way and gets away. Until he brings it to the base mishmar, this cage, which was constructed for him, a sort of cage, which has the ability to probably contain this lion, and indeed, in there, he's considered to be trapped. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. We began with the malachas of chayvel u'maver, inflicting a wound. Maver is burning, lighting a fire. The Gemara told us, according to Rabbi Yehuda, if he's being mekalkel, he is destroying, then it's pater. It's like all the other malachas. Mekalkel is not a malacha, which is chayiv. However, if he's doing these malachas in a manner which he's mesakin, for instance, he's inflicting the wound to get the blood for his dog, or he's burning to get those ashes. In this case, the malacha assumes a nature of mesakin. It's considered to be something of a constructive nature, and he's chayiv. According to Reb Shimon, whether he's mekakel or mesakin, in either case, he is chayiv because chayvel maver is chayiv even if it's done derech kilkel, unlike the other malachas. The Gemara proceeded with the malach of tzeda. We learned that Rabbi Yehuda requires the bird to be driven specifically into the migdal to be considered to be properly contained and trapped. An animal into a bayis. Chacham maintain a bird even to a bayis is considered to be trapped. When it comes to a tzipa droyer, this freely flying bird, this rebellious bird, in which case it is not considered to be trapped until it is driven specifically into a migdal. When it comes to a chay, even a beaver, even a closed area is sufficient. The Gemara told us it needs to be specifically a type of beaver which allows the owner to fully control the animal. He doesn't need to go ahead and invest effort in trapping. It needs to be a beaver katan. The Gemara told us three descriptions. Either if he can catch it simply with one lunge, or the Gemara told us if it's not large enough that the shadows of the walls meet each other, or if it doesn't have these corners where the animal can escape into. The Gemara discussed trapping a deer, a blind deer, a sleeping deer is chayiv. A lame, old, or a sick deer is pater. If the sickness is a sickness of fatigue, which renders him immobile. When it comes to trapping grasshoppers, if it is at the time of the tal of the dew, when their eyes are blinded, he's pater. When it's the time of shar, extreme heat, he's chayiv. Allah Subhanahu tell us, if in the time of extreme heat they're coming in swarms, they're makalchos, in this case, he is pater. The Gemara concluded with the halacha of trapping a deer in a home. If one person does it on his own, he's chayiv. Two together do it, they're pater. But if they both need each other for the closing of the door, then indeed they're chayiv. According to Reb Shimon, in this case, a pater. The Gemara concluded with the trapping of the lion, which is only considered to be trapped if he is in his appropriate cage.